Welcome to Roads Less Traveled, the podcast where real estate, rail trails, and bike tourism meet. I'm Craig Della Penna. I'm a realtor with a passion for turning former railroad corridors into thriving trails and communities. If you're curious about buying homes near these trails, starting a bed and breakfast, or simply want to learn about the incredible opportunities along these greenways, you're in the right place. Every 2 weeks, I'll share stories, expert advice, and conversations with guests who know the ins and outs of rail-to-trail living and tourism. Ready to explore a unique slice of real estate and adventure? Let's hit the trail. Welcome, Kristen, to the podcast here.
Hi, Craig.
Kristin Vevon is a trusted real estate agent. Actually, you're a realtor with the Murphy's Realtors in Western Massachusetts, licensed since 1992. Oh, I didn't know that. Serving communities across the Pioneer Valley, a Whately resident since 1982.
Western Mass resident since 1982.
A Western Mass resident since 1982, and founded the real estate book of Western Massachusetts in 88 to help local buyers and sellers connect with the goal of making home ownership both informative and enjoyable. I remember the real estate book. That was like a nice 5x8 size little booklet that would in yellow little bins all over the valley. There used to be. And in the last 5 years, once we've been in the seller's market, Kristen has come on board with me because it's hard to do a print formatted thing today when they need a month or 6 weeks lead time, I think, to get it out there. But in the past 5 years, Kristen has closed numerous transactions totaling over $7 million, demonstrating a consistent track record of success in markets like Florence, Northampton, and beyond into the hill towns. Welcome, Kristen.
Thanks, Craig.
Yes,
that's 99% accurate.
Okay. What was wrong? Tell me what was wrong.
Oh, no, just started in Western Mass in 1982. And it's true that I did start the real estate book in 1988. But have I been really working with you for 5 years? Maybe.
Yeah. It was right around COVID. Yeah, right around COVID.
Geez. Boy, time flies when you're having fun.
That's right. That's right. Yep, it's Trailside Team. We are a name. People recognize what we do, and one of my earliest questions here for you today is why properties along bike trails and greenways are attracting so much attention. And maybe you'll want to talk about your upcoming project here. Like we're talking today, I think September 10th we're today, but this won't be out live as a podcast, official podcast, until sometime in October. And you'll be live then probably with your project off of View Street in Northampton. Do you want to talk a second about why that is going to be such an attractive project to talk about near the rail trail?
First off, that's our third project near the rail trail. The first project, which was over on Sherman Avenue in downtown Northampton, a little far for about almost a mile, a little far from downtown for walking, right on the bike trail. And every single party who bought on the rail there bought for the rail trail. And that we'd already known that it was attractive to people, but that just, okay, this is something that's really important to people.
So the developer there was Todd Salura with his company Sovereign Builders, and he was stunned by the attraction that he did not realize that the trail was going to be big for him.
And I knew it was big, but I didn't realize that it was going to be that big. We actually had people come and figure out exactly how many feet away they were from the rail trail. It's like,
They had a measuring wheel or something?
yeah, no, yeah, they had an app, a satellite app. And then they had all the rail trails in every single house. They would measure how far away they were from the rail trail. And that turned out to be very close.
Yes.
And then we started, then when our second project, these are townhouse condominiums, was a 5 unit, which is almost finished, under construction right now, which is right near our office in Florence, but also very close to the rail trail. And at this point, we were realizing that this is what should be happening. So now we're looking for projects as near the rail trail so that, that we can do this in the future. After this project, there's a fourth and a fifth project that are coming near the rail trails.
The View Street project, or you're calling it Trails Edge Commons.
Trails Edge Commons, correct.
That is not an over 55 complex. This is a
No,
standard sale price. Okay.
correct. It's a standard condominiums. They're actually villas. They're all standalone villas. And there's going to be bike storage. There's a special ramps built directly through the development. There's going to be 8 houses and then, or villas or whatever. They're smaller. They're not that small, but they're all first floor living, because we believe that also that it is the market for this is 55 and plus. There are people who don't want to get in their car every day and drive anymore. They want to be able to walk, and this is walkable, and or bike wherever they want. And this is right in downtown with wonderful bike access. But he's so acknowledging that the bike market is so important that, I mean, we're putting bicycle sheds out just to say the word bicycle.
I should point out to our audience that this location is going to be adjacent to the right-of-way of the Mass Central Rail Trail, or the Neurotic section in Northampton, just west of the Connecticut River, and it's going to be on the west side of the active railroad. I think it's on the west side of the active railroad. It's not going to be, let me think now.
No, it's on the east side.
Yes, that's right. It's on the east side. To get into downtown Northampton, you're going to have to go through the formal tunnel under the active railroad and then head south about a half a mile. And so this is a very desirable locations for certainly. Let's talk a little bit about, tell me some of the stories of some of the buyers of these complexes that you've been involved in. What did the buyers say why they really wanted to move there? What's some of the interesting stories?
Well, we're a little different in the Northampton market because it's a very liberal market and it's a very active market. So a very green market. So most of the people who are moving here from elsewhere are moving here for that lifestyle. They want to be in neighborhoods. They want to connect. They want to know their neighbors. They want to ride bikes with their neighbors. It's more of a community. And so the like-minded people, which the bike people are all very like-minded, as you well know, Craig, because you deal with so many of them across the board. And even if they can't get on their bikes, they're still bike people. And they still want the walking trail. It's not just a bike trail, it's also a walking trail. And I'd say it's probably 50-50 these days, if not more, where you see people, out with strollers and power walking, running, not just cycling anymore. Also, then with the advent of all the e-bikes, someone like me who hasn't been able to bike in 20 years comfortably, now I feel like, oh boy, I can actually go on a little adventure. I can go somewhere on my bike. I think people really move here for the lifestyle, and having properties along greenways and trails is definitely part of it.
That's great. Tell me a little bit about your journey in the publishing realm first, before you became into the real estate agent, realtor.
I actually moved to Western Massachusetts in 1982. as I had a job offer with the Advocate newspapers here in Western Mass, and I was their advertising and marketing director. And as soon as I crossed over the, what do you call it, the tofu curtain from
Mm.
Holyoke coming down into the valley, I just felt wonderfully at home. Again, moving here for the lifestyle and everything else that happens. And I just fell in love with the Pioneer Valley. And I enjoyed working with the Advocate. I met lifelong friends there, learned a lot about advertising and marketing. And then after I had my son in 1986, it became more difficult to work. That was a 60, 70 hours a week job. So in 1988, I was on vacation in Charleston, South Carolina, which is where my misspent youth was. And I was on vacation down there, and I saw a real estate magazine. And I fell in love with it, first of all, because there was no editorial. The pictures and the copy about the houses for sale was the editorial. And that, to me, was just a great informational packaging of real estate. And I really liked, and I liked looking at it. And I wanted to call people and find stuff out. And when I came back home, I was like, I should start one of these. And so I went to a couple of local realtors that I knew well. And I said, what do you think about this? And I threw a copy on their desk, and they were like, I want the first 2 pages.
Mm.
Then I went to the second one, and I said, what do you think about this? They go, I want the first 2 pages. And I'm like, oh, I already promised that to Pat Goggins. And it went on like that. Everybody saw the value of print advertising back then. And then it was 100% print for about 15, almost 20 years. And then we started moving into the actual online, putting everything online. We were one of the first companies to feed all of our advertisers, just our advertisers' data into national searches like the New York Times. We were with HGTV. We provided the content for all of those early websites when they first started, was all provided by the real estate magazine or our real estate book. We were. And then eventually we ventured into the Pioneer Valley Home magazine, which was a full size 8.5 by 11 publication that did high end $1 million listings, a different type of market. And that was fun to work on. And then I retired because it became less fun to work on
Because
during
of
the pandemic. Yeah, everything was a lot less fun during the pandemic. And the people I worked with, the graphic designers and everything, they were like, this isn't fun anymore. And then I think I had stopped doing the magazine for about 4 days when you called me and said, hey, a birdie told me that you are actually a realtor.
Mm.
And I said, well,
Yes.
that birdie shouldn't have said anything. And you said, come work a little bit. We'll come do an open house here and there. We'll have fun. So,
And I
and
was
that was,
just thinking, Kristen, that when we were off air, we were talking about early start here was actually earlier because it was in 2017 when I stood up the e-newsletter for rail trail development in the Northeast. And that was because I was involved in 4 wars in Eastern Mass, and my battle-hardened veterans wanted to quit and were getting burned out by the drama and the angst. And I said, I'm going to set up an e-newsletter. I'm going to run a Google search every day. And I had a different assistant at the time. It was Tiffany. But then she got busy with her and her husband own a tech company, and she had to disengage from the e-newsletter. So that's when I brought you on. It was like 2020. And we run a Google search every day of every story of every newspaper in the United States looking for stories about rail trails and the good, the bad, and the ugly. And so the stories that are pertinent here in the Northeast get made into the newsletter, and you take those monthly and put them into an archive. And I was just talking to Smith College student that I brought on to revamp my Greenways Solutions website, and we're going to move the archive to that site. And she's going to get a framework set up where you can then move the entire 5 or 7 years of, I think it's closer to 8 years now, of newsletters onto this Greenway Solutions website. So you'll see that in the next few days here. Just wanted to point that out.
Okay.
But I think that's so fascinating. Can you talk more about how the internet had changed the impact of, and being in a seller's market has changed the impact of the ability to do an print magazine because things were selling so quickly? How did you discover that? When did you discover that it was going to be infeasible to do your print magazine?
Well, really, it wasn't the internet that really drove us out, because honestly, as I was
Mm,
saying, we were one of the driving factors of seeing that was going to happen,
right.
of what was happening, and also that it was great for our clients. For many years, the only internet access realtors had in the Pioneer Valley was through my real estate book. People
Right.
have forgot about that, because then MLS jumped into it and started saying, oh, we can sell our feeds to this person and this person. And Zillow, that's when it all went bad,
Zillow. Yeah.
when they started selling the feed to Zillow. And Zillow then took all of our information, took all the information and stripped all the realtors and their contact information out of it, and then started selling the leads, like the listings, to other realtors. And that's how they were making their money. And that kind of like, before that, the realtors were still deeply were connected to their listings. Like when you could go on a different website or something and see 123 Main Street, and it would still say Craig Della Penna at Murphy's Realtor. But once Zillow started stripping the realtors' names and their offices and their phone numbers out of that, then it became like the Wild West out there. And who was making the money, and who? It obviously wasn't good for the realtors. Here, all of a
Mhm.
sudden, their listings are being sold to somebody at a different company, and nobody even knows it. And then that agent would come and find you to tell you that they'd gotten your lead. So that kind of became an issue. It wasn't, I don't think it was well done or well thought out in advance. And it did impact our business, because our business was very targeted. We didn't just throw everything out there. It was certain, it wasn't back then, Google wasn't, Google, and you just couldn't, it was harder to be searchable. So, and the real estate book, and at that point, they actually owned the name homes.com, which for some reason they sold that
Mhm.
off, which another thing I didn't understand. You have the best name. And now actually homes.com I think is really like now one of the premier, more, what I like about homes.com is they don't strip the realtors' names and phone numbers and contact information off. So that makes a big difference. So,
How
I mean,
about this aspect? How about this aspect? That the fact we went into a seller's market where you didn't have time, you as a buyer didn't have time to think about it overnight. If you saw a house that you liked, you had to jump in with an offer right away, and things went under contract extraordinarily fast. How did that impact the print angle?
of course, it went from being a market where stuff moved a lot slower. And once the internet hit, then everything, once it really started working like it does today, which I want to say was maybe 10 years ago, everything
Mm,
became instant, and people had to text you back instantly, call you back instantly, respond. You do an open house now, and 2 hours later, you have two offers, and they've been emailed to you. And it's a very immediate market. And print doesn't work immediately. Print is marketing, it's not really there to actually sell a specific house. I think maybe at one point many years ago, if that was the only way that people could find real estate, if you weren't driving around in your car looking for a sign, if you it was much more slower paced, and it's just gotten quicker and quicker with the internet, obviously. And we had our turnaround time down to 2 weeks, which is pretty good for a glossy print magazine. People would give me what they wanted to put in, and 2 weeks later it was out on the street. But that still wasn't quick enough. And what most people don't understand, or I know you did, but I want to say a lot of the real estate agents, it was more marketing, that people would hold these publications in their hands, and the people who advertised in them were advertising their brand. When you had your business Pedal to Properties, I know people would ask me all the time about Pedal to Properties because they would see in your brand with the bikes and how you presented your B&B being attached to it, the rail trails. You opened an office underneath a rail trail, adjacent,
Right.
like
Yep.
literally you couldn't get any closer to a rail trail. You had a rack of bikes out front. You took pictures of it. It was presented in the magazines, and it was a big branding opportunity, and you took advantage of it by advertising it in print. And not everybody saw their business as branding. They didn't have a hook. They didn't have a niche for their business. Some of them hadn't even thought about their names, naming their stuff silly things. But it worked while it worked, but still niche magazines still exist to this day. They might not be, some of them are still, especially like fashion magazines or sailboating magazine, for some reason, is huge. Your newsletter, in a way, is really print
Yes.
and branding.
That's, and for the last several years when I've been running that newsletter, I haven't really advertised my presence in the real estate world. But as I'm no longer on the board of the Mass Central Rail Trail Alliance, or Nawatic Network is the official name, that I didn't want to do edgy stuff that sort of contaminated the project, so to speak. But now I will be branding the real estate angle into the newsletter as we go. And like the Trails Edge Commons project, as we get copy and imagery for that, I'll advertise that in the newsletter. There's a lot of people that would be interested in it who are getting the newsletter. But let me tell you about just a quick hit about why Trailside Realty, or Pedal to Properties, became functional and why it worked, is because we were in a buyer's market or a balanced market, which meant that the buyers had time to go look at a property and think about it overnight. And instead of, we'd look at 7 or 8 properties one day and then think about them and come up with a second tighter list, say 3 properties to go look. On the second showing, we would take bikes and go by bike look at those houses and see if the kids could bike to school or bike to playgrounds or proximity to bikeable destinations. It was right after Obama was elected in the fall of 2012. We went from the sweet spot of the market back then was like 350 to 500 price range. And we'd see 30 people at an open house or 30 parties at an open house. After he was elected, bang, we saw 70 to 90 parties at open houses, and offers were coming at multiple offers. And we didn't have the opportunity anymore to go by bike between showings. And so that's when I decided that it looks like it's going to be a seller's market for a long time, that I decided to merge in with the Murphys. And we were, I think, the third most prosperous, most productive real estate firm in the Northampton area.
Yep.
And I decided to merge in with the Murphys. We had 11 realtors, 7 of them came on board with the Murphys and came with a nice, cute office, 5 doors from my house here in Florence. And I said, who could not love that? And so that's where we ended up, and never looked back. Had fun down there. We were part of Arts Night Out. We had 100 to 150 people a month coming in to our art gallery there. Carol Gobin was one of your graphic people that put together your magazines. She was one of the artists there. It was just, it all worked. It was a fun years there. The 4 years we had that running. Yeah, that was good. What
Yeah,
else? What else do you want to talk about here today?
I don't know. Let's talk about how the trail-based developments contribute. We know how they contribute to our local economy here in Northampton. You live on a trail, you run a B&B on a trail, and that's a happening thing in Northampton area. But that idea of extending that economy along the bike trails is very different because it's a highway of
Mm,
sorts for a certain type of people who want to live and travel along those bike trails. So what we're finding out is that as the bike trails connect the communities, there is housing and development. People want to buy B&Bs to run along that. Restaurants want to open up around the bike trails. It really has been making a difference in terms of creating a different economy in these smaller towns that for so many years have fallen off of the path. They were mainly in where we are here in New England anyway, mainly small manufacturing companies, water powered mills, lots of almost every town here has a series of old brick mills along waters and canals that is now being revitalized. And all of them are interested in having a bike trail.
yes.
Um, it doesn't matter what the community is. And even the people then who fight the bike trails and don't want the bike trails because they see it as something that is not going to be good for the community. They think it's going to bring crime and little old ladies and moms pushing strollers. They're afraid of those people. But then as soon as it happens, people are very happy. The biggest
Yeah.
naysayers end up riding their bikes, and their grandchildren are riding their bikes on the trails to school, that type of thing. So it really makes a big difference. And as it spreads out, I mean, that economy along the trails is spreading with the help of some of these local bike communities. And, what do we call them, Craig?
The, I'm not sure
Like
what you mean.
the groups that you work with.
Advocacy groups,
Yeah, the advocacy group.
Friends of
That's
the
right.
Trail groups. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah, they are out there. The trail that your Trails Edge Commons is on, the Mass Central Rail Trails. They're going to be the longest trail in New England from Boston to Northampton. And it's two-thirds open today, but the complicated sections are left to do. All the low-hanging fruit, easy to build sections are pretty much done. So DOT is costing it up right now. Here we are, first 2 weeks of September. I think in about 3 weeks it'll be open. The report that they're producing on how much it's going to cost will be done. And there's a lot of state reps and senators that are chomping at the bit now to have DOT take this on as a project, not instantly, that maybe a 5-year plan here to be able to do this in a thoughtful way that'll bring impact. For example, the best way to build this out is to finish it in incremental layers from the east, moving to the west. And that way, the big groups of people coming out to explore won't be impeded by a gap. That if they do it in a sort of hopscotch manner, they have to really build it out from the east to the west. And there's several sections that have gaps that are going to be expensive. But once it gets built out, and when you have the opportunity for overnight journeys, biking or walking journeys overnight, where you have to stay in a place, not merely a tenting campground, but you have to stay in a bed and breakfast. In the middle of Massachusetts, in Worcester County, there are no real overnight accommodations. So one of the reasons I wanted to set up this podcast was to touch on that aspect. We're going to have people that operate bed and breakfast here talk about the highs and lows of running a bed and breakfast. And we're going to have people who work for a company of an aggregator of bed and breakfasts that are under an umbrella that we can set up called Mass Central Rail Trail Bed and Breakfast Association or something like that. They won't be Airbnbs. Those are a little bit different, though we could take on Airbnbs to be part of this, but that will be a subject for the deep dive on that subject. But nonetheless, I would say that we can do this, that what happens, Northampton is a very prosperous place. Hadley, Amherst, they're all prosperous. Belchertown, they're all getting built out. Belchertown is underway. People don't realize that. It was voted down 25 plus years ago, but now it's under development, it's getting underway. And so we have gaps that are in places that are forgotten, and most people have never heard of places like Wheelwright or New Braintree or Bondsville or Gilbertville, or people might have heard of Ware, but that's another sort of forgotten place. And the trail getting built out in those places will create a renaissance in their village center, downtown locations. It'll be people coming without their cars, but only by bike or walking. Once the trail becomes available for overnight journeys, those places will experience a renaissance. It happens everywhere. Not
Because
gentrification, but just a renaissance.
because the people coming on the bikes are coming to eat food and money overnight, buy ice cream, stop and buy supplies, then check out the town. Oh, wow, this is really cute. Look, the real estate prices here are
Mm,
2/3 less
yeah.
than what we're paying. And it's such a wonderful little town on a bike trail.
Mhm.
Boy, when people find out on the bike trails here in Northampton, we have a bunch of people who, like our UMass professors and stuff like that, that they can it's a 6 miles on the bike trail without traffic to their job. And it's amazing. But I really think that the Ware in that area, you could get to UMass from there on a bike trail very,
Yes,
very easily.
yes,
Especially now people used to say, oh, there's a hill, it's downhill one way, no matter how slight. But now with the assist bikes, that's not even an issue anymore.
that's
They're
right.
going to go year round, these trails.
That's right.
And people are going to, when I first went out to Boulder, not when I first, but I was in Boulder, Colorado about 15 years ago. And I was shocked I was there during the winter. It was snowing, snowstorms. They plow the bike trails first. They have specialized plows, and I had never seen them before. Now I've seen them all over the place. But for the bike trails, and the bike trails have right of way
Yeah.
on the roads. It's a very biking community, and it really worked, and it really opened my eyes way back then, how great it would be to get around like that.
In Northampton here, when we first moved here, the trail was not plowed. The trail opened here in 1982. They didn't start plowing it till 2005 because so many kids were walking or biking to school that they determined it looks like a transportation use, therefore we're going to plow it. And it is. And it's,
Huge transportation,
yes.
especially as you said, for the kids walking to school.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and it's funny, my kid walked to school on that rail trail from Northampton to Jackson Street School. And I remember, like, when I first heard of it, I was like, what are they? They're on a trail, like behind houses. It's not on the main street. I mean, you know, and the first time I walked it with him, I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. Who
Mm-hmm.
was on that rail trail? Hundreds of kids
Yeah,
and their parents biking to school.
yeah,
I mean, moms pushing it's a very friendly community.
that's right. So, well, we're right around noontime here, Kristen. So I want to thank you for taking time out of your busy day. And so I think we did a great job here today. Thanks for tuning in to Roads Less Traveled with Craig Della Penna. I hope today's episode gave you fresh ideas and inspiration for exploring the unique world of real estate, rail trails, and bike tourism. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share the show so we can reach more trail lovers and real estate enthusiasts like you. Stay connected, stay curious, and I'll see you in 2 weeks with more expert insights and stories from the roads less traveled. Until then, keep exploring those hidden paths and uncovering new opportunities. Thanks.